When describing the canonization of the Sikh scripture, traditional narratives categorize Guru Granth Sahib into three main recensions. These are typically contextualized through the Sakhi tradition of 19th century sources, such as Kavi Santokh Singh's Gurpratap Suraj and Gyani Gyan Singh's Sri Guru Panth Prakash. The first is the Kartarpuri recension, representing the Ad Bead compiled by Guru Arjan in 1604 CE. Next is the Banno recension, attributed to Bhai Banno as a direct copy of the Ad Bead, with the inclusion of Apocrypha, such as a Shabad attributed to Mirabai and additional compositions under Mahalla Pehla. Finally, we have the Damdami recension, which the popular narrative regards as the final version of the scripture produced by Guru Gobind Singh at Talwandi Sabo, integrating the bani of Guru Tegh Bahadur into the original Ad Bead. However, as we will see, this threefold classification is far too broad to capture the nuances and structural variations seen throughout the diverse manuscript traditions of the 17th and early 18th centuries. In fact, this very idea of only three recensions arises from a fundamental misunderstanding of the Sikh scriptural tradition and the authenticity of present-day Kartarpuri and Damdami beads. Welcome to Likhari Khalsa, where today we will be breaking down the general theory of Gurbani Recensions. If you follow us on Instagram, you may have already seen our recent post featuring this graphic. This, to our knowledge, is the first comprehensive diagram illustrating the transmission of Gurbani and proposing a general framework for categorizing manuscripts as recensions. A quick note before we begin, this chart isn't arranged as a chronological timeline. Instead, it's organized around scriptural traditions, which means we'll occasionally move back and forth through history to establish the context. With that in mind, let's break down this chart from left to right, starting with the independent scribal traditions. It is important to note that Gurbani was transmitted both orally and scribally, a dual process common to many traditions. The Vedas, for instance, were first preserved through oral recitation, known as Shruti, or that which was heard, before being recorded and standardized into the texts we know today. Scripture, in essence, originates from oral tradition. We see similar patterns in the transmission of Sikh historical and hagiographical literature. For example, the Janam Sakhi tradition is believed to have evolved from oral storytelling, and Ratan Singh Pangu's Sri Guru Panth Prakash explicitly claims to draw upon narratives passed down by his forefathers. It is therefore reasonable to infer that Gurbani too began its transmission from oral tradition. The independent scribal traditions represent early compilations of Gurbani produced by Sikhs outside the institutional Guru-Ghar tradition, compilations that were potentially unauthorized by the Gurus themselves. Among the earliest extant examples are the Ahiyapur and Pinjar Pothis, collectively known as the Goindwal Pothis. It is believed that there was originally a set of 4 Pothis in the possession of the Palla family, passed down hereditarily through their descendants. Today, only the Ahiyapur Pothi is publicly available, published in 1998 by Professor Preetham Singh. The Pinjar Pothi, while previously examined by scholars, remains in the private custody of the Palla family of Pinjar. Another significant example is the Bahowal Pothi, preserved at Bhai Veer Singh's Sahit Sadan in Delhi. This manuscript reflects a very early scribal tradition, particularly within the time of Guru Arjan and Guru Hargobind. However, it contains later interpolations to make it conform to the mainstream canon. We must also mention Guru Nanak Dev University's MS 1245, which remains a highly controversial manuscript. A defining characteristic of this bead is that it excludes the bani of the bhagats. Some scholars, such as Bashara Singh and Gurinder Singh Maan, consider it an early draft of the Ad bead of Guru Arjan, which for simplicity's sake we will refer to as the Amritsari bead moving forward. However, when looking at the internal evidence of the manuscript, this early draft theory appears highly unlikely. Other prominent scholars such as Dr. Pyar Singh and Balwant Singh Dhillon argue against this theory and instead date the origin of MS 1245 to the era of Guru Har Gobind. Now, let's delve into the Apocryphal traditions. In our chart, Pran Sangli and Madhavnal Kam Kandla appear as branches descending from this category. To clarify, Pran Sangli and Madhavnal Kam Kandla are not apocryphal texts themselves, but rather the sources from which Gurbani Apocrypha were derived. For instance, Ragmala originates from Madhavnal Kam Kandla, while Ratanmala is derived from Pran Sangli. Similarly, some scholars trace certain apocryphal compositions to the poetry and prose of the various Janamsakhi traditions, particularly the Jetadar Lakh Muhammada and Bai Atish Ab Salokas. Other scholars, however, regard these as authentic compositions of Guru Nanak based on linguistic analysis. It is, in fact, the presence of these very apocryphal compositions that leads proponents of the traditional three recension model to arbitrarily classify certain manuscripts under the umbrella of Banno recensions, implying a shared lineage that likely never existed on the sole basis of the initial copy. This overgeneralization has shaped many of the misconceptions surrounding the textual history of Guru Granth Sahib. More broadly, this reflects a tension between theological and historical perspectives. The post-colonial theological tradition seeks a single unbroken lineage, a pure and unified scriptural tradition. The manuscripts, however, reveal a more fluid and pluralistic reality, one shaped by multiple scribes, regions, and evolving devotional practices. Recognizing this contrast helps us see the formation of Gurbani not as static, but as a living, dynamic tradition. The final component of the independent traditions involves different compilations produced by the traditions of the bhagats. There are many theories on how Bhagat Bani was officially adopted into the Guru-Ghar tradition. From an egalitarian perspective, the Guru-Ghar viewed spirituality not as something that belongs to just one tradition, but rather as a truth that exists beyond identity. It is worth noting that the Gurus already possessed the Bani of the Ad Bhagats, namely Kabir, Namdev, and Farid. The extant Goindwal Pothis also contain their compositions, showing that these works were already a part of the early scriptural corpus. However, when it comes to the Bani of the remaining Bhagats, scholarly opinions begin to diverge. According to G.B. Singh, these compositions were collected by followers from the different Bhagat traditions within Punjab, and the Gurus then utilized only those works that aligned with Gurmat. Professor Sahib Singh maintains that Guru Nanak himself compiled both his own Bani and the Bani of the Bhagats. Contrarily, Harnam Das Udasin proposes that Guru Nanak's primary aim during his Udasis was to travel to different regions to gather the writings of the Bhagats from their followers. A very different position is held by Gyani Gurdit Singh, who argues that all the Bhagats were actually contemporaries of the Gurus. However, this is a less accepted and historically incoherent theory. The musical tradition refers to pothis or compilations of shabads primarily used by rababis and kirtanis. It can be hypothesized that textual variations across shabads appearing in multiple sections of Guru Granth Sahib, such as the Sodar Shabad, likely originated from this musical tradition. These variations, like the addition of words such as Tudno, may have served as shingar or the ornamentation of poetry when singing. This theory has been formulated on the basis of beads in which the Sodar Shabad is identical in all three incidences. While we do not currently have extant musical tradition pothis to study for ourselves, we can reasonably assume that many shabads were passed down orally among rababis and kirtanis before being transcribed into kirtan pothis, manuscripts designed specifically for musical rendition. Moving on to the Guru-Ghar tradition, we enter what can be considered the primary line of Gurbani transmission among the Gurus themselves. We also refer to this as the Hereditary Tradition, as pothis of Gurbani appear to have been passed down as heritage within the families of the early Gurus. We begin with the pothi of Guru Nanak's Bani, which was likely transferred to Guru Angad upon the succession of Guruship. However, it is also plausible that this pothi was inherited by one of Guru Nanak's sons, Sri Chand or Lakshmi Das, as a part of hereditary lineage. Similarly, regarding the pothi of Guru Angad's Slokas, it can be hypothesized that it was either passed on to Guru Amar Das or to Guru Angad's sons, Datu and Dasu. This detail is significant as it may or may not be connected to the historical conflict that occurred at Khadur Sahib. Given the strong influence of hereditary tradition at the time, it is in fact less likely that this pothi went directly to Guru Amar Das, especially considering what might be described as the Mayflower mentality of the Sikhs migrating to new cities after the transfer of Guruship. The Goindwal pothis were essentially the pothis written under the direct supervision of Guru Amar Das. You may have noticed that we have placed these pothis in both the independent and Guru-Ghar traditions in our chart. The reason for this is that the extant volumes we refer to as the Goindwal pothis, namely Ahiyapur and Pinjore, may or may not be the same manuscripts as the historical Goindwal pothis. As we touched on earlier, it is traditionally held that there was originally a complete set of 4 pothis which were then passed down hereditarily to the descendant families of the Guru. Next, we turn to the Jap pothis of Guru Ramdas. Scholars like Harnam Das Udasin reference a passage from Kavi Santokh Singh's Gurpratap Suraj, specifically the 41st Ansu of the 3rd Ras, which reads, Yante Pratham Naam Jap Rakhyo, Sab Gurbani Ko Eh Pakhyo. Harnam Das interprets this as evidence that Jap was not merely the name of a composition, but the proper title of the entire pothi containing the collected bani of the Gurus. Numerous manuscripts record Japji Sahib as a copy of a transcription bearing the signature of Guru Ramdas, indicated in the Tatkara or table of contents by the line, Jap Guru Ramdas Jiyo Kyan Daskatan Ka Nakal. This implies that the mainstream text of Japji Sahib may derive from a copy of a version personally transcribed or standardized by Guru Ramdas, affirming the reverence and authority associated with these pothis within the scribal tradition. Finally, taking the bani from all of these Guru-Ghar pothis as well as from the traditions of the bhagats, Guru Arjan undertook the compilation of what we refer to as the Amritsari bead at Ramsar in 1604 CE. This event is a cornerstone of our mainstream historical tradition and represents the formalization of the scriptural canon. The scribal tradition continued to flourish under Guru Hargobind, with many beads being written during his time. In fact, the earliest extant manuscripts of the mainstream canon can be dated to this era. As the physical seat of the Gurus moved, so too did the center of scriptural activity. When Guru Har Rai established himself at Kiratpur, the meticulous work of copying manuscripts continued, forming what we can categorize as the Kiratpuri recension. It was from this specific lineage that a bead was given to Guru Har Rai's eldest son, Ram Rai, leading to the emergence of the Ram Rai recension. This development becomes particularly significant when examining later manuscript divergences, which will be addressed in the section on Offshoot Traditions. Regarding the compositions of the 9th Guru, we encounter several beads in which the bani of Guru Tegh Bahadur appears in a notably unorganized sequence. Instead of being integrated within the rags, these compositions are found written collectively in the final sections of the manuscript. This suggests that the Likharis of the time may have already possessed the bani of Guru Tegh Bahadur and that they themselves took the initiative to incorporate the 9th Guru's compositions into these beads. From this pattern, it is reasonable to infer that the initial inclusion of Guru Tegh Bahadur's bani into existing beads was scribal rather than institutional in nature. The act of formal organization, assigning each composition to its appropriate rag and position, likely occurred at a later stage. It is therefore plausible that Guru Gobind Singh was responsible for this formal reorganization, systematically integrating Guru Tegh Bahadur's bani into the established scriptural framework, giving rise to what we now recognize as the Anandpuri recension. We find manuscripts of these Anandpuri beads in the library of Punjabi University Patiala as well as in the treasury of Takht Sri Harmandir Patna Sahib. These manuscripts date as early as the 1680s CE, approximately 30 years before the contextualization of the Damdami narrative. A unique and controversial example is the Anandpuri Marco bead. An alternative theory diverges from the earlier explanation, proposing instead that the first formal incorporation of Guru Tegh Bahadur's bani was undertaken directly by Guru Gobind Singh, and that it occurred within this very manuscript dated to 1687 CE. This bead is remarkable in several respects. It is written in the Shikasta script, potentially in the hand of Guru Gobind Singh himself. Its internal characteristics are equally distinctive. Most of the mangals or invocations in the manuscript are rendered as Ik Oankar Sri Akal Ji Sahai, rather than the more familiar Ik Oankar Satgur Prasad. It also exhibits the gradual disappearance of the trailing laga matras, reflecting the evolving linguistic conventions of the time. According to Manohar Singh Marco, the Likhari of this bead mentions that he is writing Bhagat Bani and Ragmala in a separate volume. Consequently, the extant bead contains only the bani of the Gurus, a feature that further distinguishes it from other canonical manuscripts in the same vein as Guru Nanak Dev University's MS 1245. Next, we also look at the pothis containing exclusively the bani of Guru Gobind Singh. While these individual pothis are no longer extant, it is likely that some were scribed by the 10th Guru himself. If we accept the theory of Bhai Mani Singh compiling Dasam Bani, then his 1713 CE bead containing both Ad and Dasam Bani becomes especially significant. As the earliest known manuscript containing the Dasam corpus, it is likely that the early pothis of Dasam compositions or copies of them were used to produce this bead. Here, it is also worth noting the existence of a manuscript known as the Anandpuri Hazuri bead, containing all of the Dasam Bani compositions that form the corpus of the modern-day Dasam Granth. At present, the authenticity of this bead cannot be independently verified, as its microfilm copy remains inaccessible to the scholarly public. Should it eventually be authenticated as an early Anandpur court compilation, it would further support the existence of earlier discrete pothis of Dasam Bani underlying later manuscripts. Returning to the Bhai Mani Singh bead, one of its defining characteristics is that the compositions are arranged based on authorship, with the designation Padshahi used in place of Mahalla. The bead proceeds sequentially from the Bani of Guru Nanak through Guru Gobind Singh, followed by Bhagat Bani, Pat Bani, and Apocrypha. This bead contains all Apocrypha, including the Jitdar Lakh Muhammada and Bhai Atish Ab Salokas, Hakikat Ra Mukam Raje Shivnab Ki, Ratanmala, and Ragmala. It is important to emphasize that the Bhai Mani Singh bead is not unique in containing both Ad and Dasam Bani within the same volume. There are some beads, for example, that integrate the Shabads from Shabad Hazare Padshahi Dasvi directly into their respective rags, such as Ramkali, Bilawal, and Devgandhari. We also find other manuscripts where Dasam Bani is organized in various ways within the Ad Bani structure. It is likely that these diverse manuscripts were copies of the Bhai Mani Singh recension. In fact, internal formatting of the Bhai Mani Singh bead also suggests that these separate Dasam Bani recensions emerged from this tradition. The eventual separation of Ad and Dasam Bani likely arose from practical considerations, particularly the size and weight of the manuscripts. A combined bead would have been substantially larger and more difficult to carry, leading to the separation into volumes. Finally, we turn to what can be broadly categorized as the offshoot traditions. Compilations of Gurbani produced by sectarian or heterodox lineages that developed alongside but outside of the mainstream Guru-Ghar tradition. One such example is the tradition of the Hindaliye, the followers of Baba Hindal, who composed their own writings modeled on the poetic conventions of the period. Similarly, Meherban Sodhi, the son of Prithi Chand, produced compositions that followed comparable literary forms. While these texts reflect contemporary devotional expression, they represent parallel traditions rather than extensions of the canonical lineage. The Ramrai recension, as noted earlier, descended from the Kiratpuri recension of Guru Har Rai. It is highly likely that the specific recensions that conclude on Mondavani actually originated from either the Kiratpuri or Ramrai beads. Over time, these manuscripts exerted considerable influence on later scribal activity. Building upon this, it can be theorized that the group of manuscripts now collectively labeled as Kartarpuri beads were in fact copies of the Ramrai recension. Although modern scholarship often subsumes these under the broader Paibanno category, such labeling obscures their distinct lineage and further contributes to the oversimplification of recension history. Lastly, in the late 18th to early 19th centuries, a new phase of standardization emerged. During this period, a set of beads underwent sudai or correction carried out by Malwai Likharis using these Kartarpuri manuscripts as a reference point. The corrected volumes that resulted from this process came to be known as the Damdami beads recognized today. This final stage illustrates how later practices retroactively shaped the perception of earlier manuscript traditions, reinforcing fixed labels that mask a far more complex and layered history of Gurbani transmission. This concludes our breakdown of the recension chart. We hope this video helped delineate the intricacies and nuances underlying the transmission of Gurbani across the centuries. Our goal is to expand the collective understanding of Gurbani recensions beyond the traditional triad of Kartarpuri, Banno, and Damdami recensions. The framework presented here is not intended as a final or absolute model, but as an evidence-based approach that better accounts for the diversity of scribal practices, regional traditions, and institutional developments reflected in surviving manuscripts. By engaging directly with the material history of beads, we can move beyond reductive classifications and toward a more historically grounded understanding of the Sikh scriptural tradition. We welcome questions, critiques, and discussion in the comments. These interpretations are offered not as fixed conclusions, but as working theories, open to revision as new evidence emerges and further analysis is applied. As researchers, our perspectives continue to evolve alongside the sources we study. If you haven't already, please be sure to follow Likhari Khalsa on Instagram, YouTube, and Substack, where we regularly share research on handwritten beads and the historical development of the Sikh scripture. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.